Hello, good afternoon. Thank you all for joining me today for our iMeet Central University course. This is an Administration 101 course designed for those of you who are either company administrators or workspace administrators, or maybe you're just an end user and you're curious to know what it is that your admins are capable of doing. Either way, this is an introductory course. It's going to be pretty high level. We are expected to take about an hour of your time, and so I thank you all for joining me today. The expected outcomes for today are to understand how to manage primary company level and workspace level settings in iMeet Central, and prepare you to add, edit, and manage team member access and permissions. So again, this is a high-level presentation. We're going to be covering a lot of ground today. If you see a feature that you have a specific question about, I may not have time to answer all your questions, but what I would do is refer you to our Help Center, and you can read up on specifics like what are roles, what are user groups. Today is really just about managing those settings. So before we dive into the demo, I've got a couple slides to show you, and we'll start here. There are three administrative areas in iMeet Central, and I'm going to get out my nifty PowerPoint laser pointer. Ooh, look at that over here on the left. Let's start with this one. So company administrators, what can a company admin do in iMeet Central? Well, the number one thing is a company admin manages your user licenses. This is the person who invites new people to iMeet Central by sending them an email invitation with a request to set up their username and password. A company admin can also update the digest settings as well as workspace defaults. So company admin can make some really broad sweeping changes across the entire system. Company admins can edit user groups and roles and create workspace level workflow. So if you were ever wondering, hey, can I get an email notification when a workspace is created? Yes, you can. A company administrator would need to create a workflow rule. And I'm going to show you where these things are here in the system in a minute. Company administrators can update and modify custom fields, which you can use for reporting purposes. They can also modify and delete templates. So workspace templates, task list templates, milestone templates. If you've ever created a milestone template and then you're like, how do I make a change to this? A company admin can make those changes. Company administrators have access to exclusive admin reports and can view billing information about the account. Company admins can also manage your proof integration and manage workspaces. So deleting workspaces, running backups, and so on. Now, workspace administrators also have a lot of control over individual workspaces. A user can be an admin in one workspace and not an admin in another. So workspace administrator permissions are given on a workspace per workspace basis. But once you are a workspace admin, you can add users to workspaces. Now, notice that this sentence here and this sentence here, manage user licenses and adding users to workspaces. They sound similar, but there's an important difference there. A company admin can add users to the system and appropriate them a license that you're paying for. But once a user has been added to iMeet Central, a workspace administrator can invite them into a workspace. Workspace administrators can modify user permissions within those workspaces, so eliminate a user's ability to delete something or upload new files. They can clone and archive workspaces, and they can make changes to workspace settings. They are also the only people who can modify workspace layouts, like customizing the Home tab and making changes to the tabs. They can create workflow rules at the company level, like a files and discussion workflow rule or a database workflow rule. They are also the only people who can make changes to databases. A lot of people don't know this, but if you have a workspace with a database in there, only a workspace admin can make changes to it. Finally, a workspace administrator has the sole permission to share folders from one workspace to another. So if you've ever played with shared folders, only workspace administrators can do that. That's a very important thing to be aware of in case you ever stumble upon in files and discussions that option to share a folder and you're like, well, I don't want people sharing stuff that I don't know about. That's fine. If they don't have the workspace admin permission, they can't share a folder. Finally, end users have some degree of administrative privilege. They can change their own username and password. They can update their personal information and change their daily digest email frequency. They can also select their personal time zone and update their personal photo. But more importantly, end users have the ability to participate in projects. So users who are given licenses can be added to workspaces by workspace administrators, and then they can upload files and make changes and comments and so on. So I'll get rid of my laser pointer, and we'll move on here to a couple final slides before we actually get into the system. I want to make us all aware of some administrative defaults. These are behaviors you're going to see in the system depending on your permission level, whether you are a company or a workspace administrator. So this first image here is of the workspaces list. You can get to this view by clicking the workspaces button in the top left corner. Company administrators have the ability to bulk edit and manage workspaces from this list. You can also see a list of workspaces that you've been removed from. So if you are just a basic end user and you click the workspaces button, you'll see a list of workspaces and you'll see all these columns. But a workspace administrator sees all these little checkboxes along the left-hand side, which you can use to do bulk changes and actions on a workspace. For example, you can bulk move workspaces into different workspace groups or accounts, archive workspaces, delete, or run workspace backups. Common question I get asked a lot, is there a way for me to pull my information off of iMeet Central and save it locally? Yes. A workspace administrator can go to the workspaces list, check off the workspaces they want to back up, and you can back them up in bulk. There's a little button up here at the top that says List Actions that expands and it gives you those bulk updates. A quick note on workspace backups. Don't do them in batches more than 5. That's just kind of a weird thing I know. If you do it in a group of more than 5 at a time, it'll sometimes stall because our servers are trying to crunch all that stuff. So that's just a little secret rule of thumb. Some other default behaviors that you'll see are, as a company administrator, you can see a list of all company workspaces. In the Workspaces view, if you click the Workspaces button, there's a little drop-down picker up here in the corner. And you can change it to what says Company Workspaces, and it will show you a list of every single workspace, even those you haven't been added to. So if the company administrator group is removed from a workspace by a workspace administrator, I'll show you what that means in a moment, you can still see it in the company workspace list, but you cannot access it. So you'll see this weird behavior, a workspace name with a padlock next to it. If you've ever seen this in your account and you're like, what the heck is this? It is a workspace that the workspace administrator has removed the company admin group from. So this can be kind of dangerous. If you don't know who's the administrator of this workspace and you ever need to get in there, it might be tricky. Sometimes you have to contact support. We have ways of figuring out who's got the keys to those types of things. By default, company administrators are added to new workspaces as workspace administrators. So anytime a new workspace is created, if you go into the People tab and you look in the Permissions area, you're going to see this company admin group. So unless a workspace administrator deletes this group from the workspace, you as a company admin, you've got access to everything. But you are an observer in those workspaces by default, which means that you cannot be mentioned in comments or assigned to tasks, which means that for an end user in that workspace, they may not even be aware that a company administrator has visibility into it. By default, workspace administrators always see the People, Settings, and Properties tabs. They also see the Add Tab option and Options button on the Home tab. Our support team uses this trick anytime a user contacts support and they say, I need help in a workspace. Our support team can look to see if these tabs are available to them. And if they are, they know that they're a workspace administrator. This is a rule of thumb that you can use as well. Internally, if you ever have a person say, can you help me? And you look at their screen, if you see the Settings and Properties tabs on a workspace, you know automatically they are a workspace administrator. Now, within the settings area of a workspace admin has the ability to clone and archive a workspace. This is the settings tab in the workspace. And there's a subtle difference that occurs if the user is a company administrator. At the top here, you'll see this is the same view, but it's kind of like split in two. Here's one view, and down below is the exact same view, but it's a little bit different. As a company administrator, if you go into the settings tab of a workspace, you can delete the workspace from inside the workspace itself. A workspace administrator does not have that ability. So these are just some subtle differences to note. They can help you if you are ever looking over someone's shoulder and you're helping them with the system and they're clicking around and you're like, oh, go ahead and delete that, and you see them click the settings tab and they don't see that delete button. It's because they're not a company admin. So I haven't seen any questions roll in just yet. It is a little bit early to pause for questions, but what I want to do now is I want to change gears and actually get into the platform and start walking you through some of these screens. So without any questions, in the little QA room, I'm going to go ahead and minimize this presentation. There we go. And here we are. So I am in iMeet Central right now in a fictitious account called Vacao, logged in as a person named Andrea Karavis. And before we start this demo, I want to call attention to an update. So for those of you who decided to attend today, guess what? You get to see our sweet new update. This is live. In the top right corner of iMeet Central, there's now a help button. Woo! You click on this help button and you can search for help desk articles directly within this little widget. It will suggest articles based on what page you're on. And if you've got a problem with the system, click on the Contact Us button. It will allow you to submit a ticket to support. And the really cool thing about this is that support will get a link to the page where you're experiencing the issue. So I just wanted to call attention to this. Super rad. Let your users know about it. Play with it. I've been testing it all morning. I think it's really cool. Okay, so advertisement is over. Oh, thanks, Jennifer. Anybody can use that. Jennifer asked the question, is that only for company admins? No, every user will see this little help button. All right. So when you log into iMeet Central, if you are a company administrator, you will see a little cogwheel icon up here in the top right corner. This button is only visible to company administrators, and it allows you to go to two things: company setup and manage workspaces. We're going to go to the company setup screen, and I'm going to move through this relatively quickly, but I'm going to highlight some of those bullet points that were mentioned in the slide earlier. The primary job of a company administrator is to manage your internal user licenses. It's inviting people to the system, removing people from the system, and managing workspaces. When you navigate to company setup, you'll see all these tabs here across the top. And if you click into these tabs, you'll find various settings areas. So starting with the General tab, this is where you can find some basic information about your account. It shows you how much storage you're currently using and how many internal member licenses and external user licenses you're currently using. Under the Configuration Options tab, you can change the name of your company. You can also update your business days and company holidays. And this is also where you can update your iMeet Central support email address. Now I want to call attention to this because this is a really important bit of information for our support team. If a user contacts our support team and asks for access to a workspace, we will not give it to them. If a user contacts support and they say, I'm the CEO, founder, VP, senior VP, CFO of my company, and I need access to this file, our support team will say no. We don't care what a person tells us over the phone. We will refer that person to this email address. So this email address should be whoever it is has the ability to give access to users in this account. So if I were to pick on someone, I'm going to pick on Jennifer because I know Jennifer. If Jennifer Mitchell, who's on this call joining us today, is the key account administrator, then her address should be in this box because our support team will refer that user to her if there is a question about access. So that's what that is. After this call, if you do anything today, please go and make sure that that's correct, because I can't tell you the number of times support sends a person to that address and they come back and they're like, this person's no longer with the company, and then we've got to do all kinds of investigating. All right. Up at the top, the little emails button here allows you to change some of your digest settings. So for example, people get daily digest emails. You can change the from name, the email address, and the subject line, which is kind of nice, so you can personalize that. The member defaults button, this little area here, allows you to customize the default invitation email text when a person is added to the system. It also allows you to update the default workspace permissions whenever a user is added to a new workspace. The workspace defaults window reveals some workspace settings that you as a company administrator can change across the board. So for example, if you ever said, you know what, we want to turn the audit log on for our workspaces, you can change that here in company setting and apply this change to all existing workspaces. Click on Update in the bottom right-hand corner, and guess what? You just turned the audit log on for all of your workspaces. This is also where you can change your document status options, which you can use in files and discussions for filtered views and reporting. The Internal Members tab is where you as a company administrator can add and manage your internal user licenses. This is the primary role of a company admin. To add an internal user to iMeet Central, you're going to click the Add Internal Members button in the top left corner. The Add Internal Members screen allows you to send an email invitation to a person so that they can configure a username and password. It's important to note that their email domain does not matter. So if I work for Microsoft and all of my team members have an @microsoft.com email address, but I want to add someone to the account and their email address is like @google.com, it doesn't matter. You can invite whoever you want. You just send them an email invitation by entering in a separate line for every address. So for example, if I wanted to invite 3 people at once, I would go address 1 @address.com, address 2 @address.com, and address 3 @address.com. And they will all 3 receive a separate email with a unique link to configure their username and password. You can customize the subject of that message and the body of the message. You can also add them to workspaces at the time that they have been added to the system. So if you're like, these people need access to our ad space, you can do that at this time. This is also where you can set what permissions they have at the time that they're added to that workspace. If you're using user groups, which is a really great way to manage user permissions in bulk, you can add them to a group at the time that they're added to the company. So you can say, these people are going to be on my creative team. And you'll see in a minute where you can add and manage these user groups. Finally, at the time a person is added, you can allow them to create new workspaces, access the company admin panel, or be registered as a billing administrator. Click the Add Members button in the bottom right-hand corner, and they'll receive an email notification. Now, when a person is added this way, they immediately occupy one of your internal user licenses. So be careful. If you've got a limited number of licenses and you're sending out a bunch of requests to add people, they're going to start hogging up space. When a person is sent an invitation, they appear in the Internal Members tab like this. Their name and username will be blank. And under the status column, you'll see that they are currently pending. If that user says, hey, I never got that email, can you resend it to me? As a company admin, you can click on this Resend Invite button, and it will allow you to email them directly with a link to set up their account. Before they set up their username and password, you can actually delete them. So you can bulk select those people and click the trash can icon here in the top right corner. It says, do you want to remove these users? You click OK, and that will essentially rescind their invitation. If they click that link in the email, it'll say that this link is broken. So you can invite people and then say, whoops, and remove them. Once a user has set up their username and password, you'll see that username here, and you'll see their first and last name in the name column, and that's how you can tell a person has actually set up their account. Once a user sets up their account as a company administrator, you can make changes to their profile. If you click the little pencil icon beside their name, it takes you into their profile editor, and here you can update their contact information, you can even update their photo, and you can change their subscription frequency. You can change how often they receive Daily Digest emails. The one thing that you cannot do is you cannot change their username. You also cannot change their security question. So if they ever contact support, they're able to identify themselves as the owner of that username. But you can, if you're curious, from the Internal Members tab, you can reset a person's password. Check the checkbox beside the person's name over here on the far right corner, and from the More drop-down, you can select Reset Password with Email Notification. So if you have a person having trouble logging in, you can reset their password for them. Under the Workspace Permissions column, you'll see this little cogwheel. If you click that cogwheel, it will let you update that person's permissions across multiple workspaces all at once. So you can say, I need this person to have access to these 3 workspaces. Check, check, check. Scroll to the top and click on Add to Workspace. Now that person has access to those 3 workspaces. You can be more custom with those permissions by clicking Reassign Permissions. And you can go in here and say, I don't want them to delete or download anything, and click on Apply. Changing a person's permission will not notify them. So have at it. Go crazy. You can go in here and mess with people's permissions all day long. They will never know until they go in, and then they're like, I can't download stuff anymore. So don't worry about changing stuff in here. It's not going to blast a person's inbox. I will go back to Company Setup and go to the Internal Members tab. Now, removing a user from the system can be done one of 2 ways. You can select a person's name, and you can click the trash can icon. That's the first way. You can do this in bulk. You can delete multiple people. When you delete a user from iMeet Central, they are not notified, but they can no longer log in. Deleting a user from iMeet Central will not strip any reporting data from the system, which means if they completed tasks, made comments, uploaded files, all of that stuff is saved. But I recommend, rather than deleting people, that you deactivate them. And deactivating a user is pretty much the same thing. You check the little box beside their name, and rather than clicking the trash can icon, you click the More button and you click on Make Inactive. It says, do you want to make them inactive? Are you sure you want to do that? You click on OK. Why do I recommend deactivating users instead of deleting them? Well, first of all, a deactivated user does not take up an internal user license. So you're accomplishing the same goal. You freed up an internal user license so you can add another person to the system. But the cool thing about deactivating a user is that you still have access to their profile. You still have a record that they were once a user in the system. And even better, if this person ever needed to be reactivated, you can check the box beside their name, click on More, and click on Make Active, and it restores all of their permissions and all of their access. This is especially useful if a person ever comes back or needs access to the system again. You don't have to be reminded of all the workspaces that they were a member of. If you delete a person from the system and you want to re-add them, it's a nightmare. Now, you may be saying, well, when people leave, they never come back. That's totally fair. I get you. But I still recommend deactivating for the purpose of having a record of them in your user list. So if you ever wanted to go back in and say, over all the years we've been a customer of iMeet Central, who are all the people who ever had visibility, it's especially useful. If you ever want to get a list of all your users, you can click the Export to CSV button in the top right corner. It gets you a nice little CSV version. There are a number of accounts that I know of who will run this report and save it locally, sometimes on a monthly basis, sometimes a quarterly basis, because it gives you some nice information, the date added, when they were last active, and how many workspaces they have access to. This also pulls all users in the list regardless if they're active or not. So that Export to CSV button is really nice. It's super fast, and it's there for you if you need it. The External Members tab functions a lot in the same way. External users are added at the workspace level. I'll show you what that looks like in a moment, but once they're added, you can manage them here. The Groups and Roles tab is where you can create user groups and user roles. Now, user groups are especially useful for adding people to workspaces in bulk. So, for example, maybe I have a user group that I need to create. Maybe I have like a publication team. I can create a new user group and title it Publication Team. I can determine whether or not that group is visible on their profile. So if a person views their profile, they'll be like, oh, this person's on the publication team. I can select the people who I need in that team and click on Create Group. When a user group has been created, it appears here in this list. You can modify the group by clicking the little pencil icon beside the group name. From here, you can add or remove users as needed based on how you have yourselves internally organized. But even better, if you scroll down, you can add this group to workspaces in bulk. So I just gave my publication team access to these 3 projects. All 3 of them have the same permission level setting. And this is especially useful if you ever need to add a person to the system and give them access to a bunch of workspaces. All you do is add them to the group and click on Update Group, and you're done. So this is a lot faster than going through and managing workspace permissions at the individual level. Workspace groups can be deleted. When you delete a workspace group, it does not delete the users in the group. So again, another part of the system where you can go in and make changes and play with things and don't worry about breaking anything. Roles are used for task assignments in project management. When you create a role in company setup, you then have to add that role to a workspace. I'll show you how to do that in a moment. But to create a new role in iMeet Central, you just click on New Role, and maybe you are adding a role. You are adding the dog sled driver because you're going to have a dog sled driver on one of your projects. That was super random, but there are already so many good roles in here, I didn't know what to pick. All right, now roles are a little bit different than groups. You do not assign people to a role in company setup. You assign a person to a role in a workspace. And again, I'll show you what that looks like shortly. But you'll notice here that there's not a lot of visible functionality here. So when you create a role, you're like, now what do I do? If you click the drop-down menu beside the role, you can edit, deactivate, or delete it. But that kind of seems like it right now. It's just a list of names. I'll show you why they're useful when we get to the workspace level. The Workflow tab allows you to create automations when things happen to workspaces. So I mentioned at the beginning of the call that if a person ever said, when a workspace is created, I want to know about it, you can do that. As a company admin, you go to the Workflow tab and you click on New Workflow Rule, and you can come in here and you can say, hey, I want an email notification to go out to Todd anytime a new workspace is created. So I'll say the name of the rule is Notify Todd when workspace is created. And you can see there's a lot that you can do with these workflow rules. I'm not going to dive into all these details right now. This is a really great place for you if you're like, hey, I got questions about workflow. You can use that support trick here. But essentially, this workflow rule, I'll say, hey, I want to trigger this when a workspace is created, and I want to notify, you can either notify a role assignee or an email address. So I can say todd@email.net. Notice that this person doesn't even need to have a license. So if you've ever been wondering, like, what's a clever way for me to notify a VP when things happen, but they don't want access? Well, you can notify them via email using a workflow rule. It's kind of neat. Customize your subject and message and click on Create Workflow Rule, and you now have a workflow rule in place that will send an email whenever a workspace is created. And you can modify, manage, and rearrange these workflow rules here in the Workflow tab. If you ever need to get rid of one, you just click Delete. Awesome. If you ever want to clone a workflow rule, if you open it, up here in the Options button here in the top right corner, you can clone a rule. So once a rule is created, if you open it, you can clone it, which is nice. You can also deactivate workflow rules. This is a really great trick if ever you're making workflow rules and suddenly people start getting email notifications and you're like, make it stop, make it stop. Just deactivate the rule. So again, you open it and you go to make inactive. And you can reactivate it if you want. Sometimes people will break their workflow rules and it'll start like doing crazy things, like it'll start creating a task every 30 seconds and they reach out to support, and the first thing support does is they go in and they deactivate your workflow rules. But you can do it too if you're ever curious. You just follow those steps. The Custom Fields tab is where you can create custom workspace, time tracking, milestone, and task property fields. Now, what are property fields used for? They are used for reporting. That's what they're used for. If you've ever said, man, I really wish I could get a list of all milestones of a particular type, and the type is like one of three things, you can create a milestone property field. If you go to the Milestone Properties tab, you can go to Add Milestone Property Field, and you can create one, and you can call it Type. You can make it a multiple choice option, and maybe, you know, like, hey, I've got flyers, I've got brochures, and I've got graphics. Click on Create Field, and then the next step here is I just add that property field to a corresponding form. So here's my list of milestone forms, and I can go to my deliverable form and I can add that type. And I know I am moving very quickly, but remember, this is just an overview. If you guys are like, wait a minute, what's he doing right now? There's a lot of help desk article on this content. And so what does that mean? Well, what that means is, let me go into a workspace here, and I'll show you what that means. So I've added a milestone property field called type, and I added it to a form called the deliverables form. So if I go into a workspace and I go into tasks and milestones and I go to create a milestone, and I've got my form up here at the top, and I say, this is a deliverable form, and I go, all right, this is the August flyer for 2018. If I scroll down here in the milestone creation wizard, check this out. There it is. There's my little type field. It's a flyer. And I click on create. And so now I can run reports that say, show me all of my flyers. There's a really cool use case I've seen for milestone property fields where people say, I want to create a team calendar. Maybe some of you were like, yeah, I want a team calendar. You create a custom milestone property field called team. And then you go in and you create a calendar report and you filter by that. So to just kind of give you a sneak peek what that means, if you go in to create a report and you've got custom property fields, check this out. This is sweet. I'm going to come down here to my calendar reports, and I've got a milestone calendar report. I've got tasks calendar reports too, but I'll do milestone calendar report, and I click on create. Here are all my milestones. If I click on Add Filter, it's going to show me my custom milestone property fields in here. So I can come down here and I can say type. Show me the list of all milestones that are flyers in a single report. Does a workspace admin have the ability to run a report using custom fields or just company administrators? Thank you, Rachel, for that question. Any user, internal user, can run a report like I'm doing right now, and all custom property fields will appear in the Add Filter and Add Column buttons that you see in the top left corner. You do not need to be an administrator to see those fields as a reporting option. But you do have to be a company administrator to make changes to those fields under the Custom Fields tab in Company Settings. I hope that answered you. Okay, so that's custom fields in a nutshell. That was like the 5-minute tour of custom fields. But again, if you're ever wondering, like, how do I create these reports that I want, I would highly recommend that you research custom fields. You can manage all of that here in Company Setup. Templates live in company settings as well. If you've ever created a task list or milestone template, they live here under the Templates tab. And one of the biggest things that comes up when a person starts looking through here is they're like, okay, I need to make a change to this template. So you're like, sweet, milestone template. And you're like, here's a template I want to make a change to, this event flyer. So I open that, and here are my task lists. And I need to make a change to my design task list. And then you get to this screen, and you're like, what the heck? Relative end date, duration, I don't know what any of this stuff means. When you convert a milestone or a task list into a template, iMeet Central will convert those dates into relative dates and durations. Because when you use the template, this is how it calculates where those dates should be. So people create templates and then they're like, whoops, I need to go ship something by like a day. And they get to here and they're like me, like math and me don't agree. And they're like, I don't know what this means. So they click on this pencil and they're like, oh, now this is even more confusing. 7 business days before or after. Here's what I recommend. If you ever need to make a change to a template, especially a task list or a milestone template, what I recommend is use that template to create a milestone in a workspace and make your changes to those dates and then convert it into a new template and title it something cool like version 2. And then you go into your milestone templates list like, here you go, there's flyer design version 2, here's the original one, just delete the old one. You click the little trash can icon right here and boop, it's gone. And so that is a little trick. I know people who spend a lot of time updating templates, don't try and update them here in company setup. It's crazy. But if you're ever wondering how to get to them and delete them, you do it under the Templates tab in Company Settings. A couple last tabs here we'll move very quickly through. The Look and Feel tab is where you can update your company logo and your colors. It also allows you to create this little custom navigation tool. If you look up here in the top right corner, look at this cool thing. I got a button here that says Bookmarks. And it lets me go straight to like workspaces or reports or files. I can make it point to whatever. That's all controlled here in the custom navigation area. So this one is nice because it's got a little instruction manual here at the top. But if you're ever like wondering, hey, is there a way that I can create a list of reports and save them and make them available to people? Yeah, use this custom navigation tool. You can call this thing whatever you want. Right now it's called Bookmarks, but I can rename it. I can call it like Reports. Reports, no, just Reports. Click on Save, give this a refresh. So this is available to you as a company admin to add a little customization to the top bar. All users in the system will see this, so just be mindful of what options you give them. It might not be smart to put a bunch of things in there that are restricted, because then people just get frustrated. The Reports tab, I talk about this in greater detail during our reporting iMeet Central University course, but this Reports area allows you to run company-level reports. These are reports that are generated using usage data. So not custom fields, but like when people log in and they delete a file. Like, how do you find out about that stuff? Well, as a company admin, you can run like the workspace audit log. You can go back to the beginning of time. So like when dinosaurs were using iMeet Central, you can check that out. And I go last 7 days, I run the report, and it will show me like all user activity across all workspaces. So like, oh look, Liz was in here. She viewed back on April 27th. She looked at one of my iMeet Central recordings. Cool. So a lot of really handy company-level reports are in here. The one that I like the most is this one. Usage by workspace. This report is sweet because I'll go back 30 days. This shows me a list of all my workspaces and how much they're being used. So if there's like any little gem that you can take away from this hour, it's this usage by workspace report is sweet because it shows you a list of all your workspaces. It shows you what workspace group they're in. It shows you how old they are, how many times they've been viewed in that time period. It shows you how much storage they're taking up. And it shows you the total number of users in those workspaces. So if you've ever been getting close to a storage cap and you're like, we got to free up space, run this report. Because this is the report that you can look at and say, holy smokes, there's 154 megs locked up in this brand assets workspace, and nobody's looked at it in the last like 30 days. Do we even need this anymore? Maybe I want to run a backup and delete it. So that's the usage by workspace report. The advanced tab is where you can set a minimum password length requirement and require password complexity, or as we all think of it, this is what drives you crazy, trying to come up with a password that meets these requirements. But hey, if you need it, there it is. You can also set password expirations. This might be an internal security requirement, or maybe you just really want to mess with your users and ask them to create a new password every 30 days. Whatever floats your boat, you can change that here. So some nice password requirements as well. If you are a billing administrator, you can access your billing information, and if you are a proof user and you have a proof integration with us, you can manage all of your proof user licenses and proof groups. And I cover this during the Review and Approve iMeet Central University course. Okay, so that was a lot to chew. That was company admin, and there was a lot there. Rachel, thank you for the question, and Jennifer, thank you for the question. I'm not seeing any new questions, so I'm going to go ahead and keep moving forward. I'm going to take a sip of my coffee. Hold on. Okay, that's much better. So now I want to show you another thing that a company admin can do. I mentioned it in the PowerPoint deck, and that is the ability to manage workspaces. So under the administrator cogwheel icon, as we call it, you've got this option here to manage workspaces. This is where you can go in and you can bulk select, and you can either move workspaces to other workspace groups or accounts. You can archive workspaces, you can delete them, and you can run backups. Now, if you run a backup, what you're going to do is you'll see a message that appears. Oh, what the heck, I'll click it. And it says, hey, you're going to get an email within 30 minutes. And that email will include a link to a downloadable zip file. That zip file will include all of your files. It will include discussions. It will include an Excel spreadsheet of your project plan. It will include Excel spreadsheets for your databases. It will not include audit log data, and it will not include comments. That is a big stickler. People are like, I'm going to run a backup, and they run the backup, and they're like, wait a minute, where are the comments? Because there's a lot of value in those. We do not have the ability to pull that information. So if you're running a workspace backup and you really need your comments, you may want to just go through and go to those specific files that are really important to you, and then copy and paste those comments like into an online document or something. So just a heads up. Be prepared for that if you ever run a backup. Now, some other cool things that workspace administrators can do is organize workspaces into groups. You've heard me mention it a couple of times now. You see it here in List Actions. If you go to List Actions and click on Move, it says this will move these 3 workspaces to a new workspace group. And I've got all these groups here, like campaigns, internal, 2017 projects, and so on. Workspace groups are simply buckets for your workspaces, but they can be so much more than that because you can filter by workspace group in a report. So if you ever said, show me all open milestones that are being worked on by our marketing department. If you go up here to the top right corner and click this My Workspaces dropdown, you'll see that there's an option for workspace groups. I would create a workspace group called Marketing Department. Once this loads, we'll find that there's a New Group button up in the top left corner, and it will allow me to create some new groups. Let me see, I was playing in here earlier, messing around with workspace groups before our call. There we go. So workspace groups. So I would create a workspace group called Marketing Department. Click on OK. Then I would go back to my list of workspaces. So I would go to Company Workspaces, shows you all workspaces, even those you've been removed from. My Workspaces shows you workspaces you have access to. I'll go with My Workspaces. So I go back to the My Workspaces page, and I pick a couple workspaces, and I click on List Actions, and then I click on Move. And I will move these workspaces into my Marketing Department Workspace group. This does two things. First, if a person in the system, any user, clicks this little drop-down menu right here, they will see a list of workspace groups, and then they navigate into the workspaces through here. So nice way to make life easy for your users. Helps with navigation, but the other cool thing is that you can filter by that group name in reporting. So nice little trick using workspace groups. You can also archive workspaces from here. If I click this checkbox and click List Actions, Archive, it says do you want to archive it? You click on yeah, okay. Archived workspaces, when you archive a workspace, you can still report on things in that workspace, like open tasks and files and whatnot, but it removes that workspace from the workspaces list, so it makes the interface a little cleaner, and it also will remove any tasks assigned to a user from that user's My Tasks page. So if a person clicks on their name and goes to Tasks, it shows them a bunch of tasks. And if they start complaining and they're like, I've got 400 tasks in here and they're all old, you can archive those workspaces and those tasks will disappear from this list. So that's a really nice favor you can do your team. Although I suppose if they've got 400 incomplete tasks, maybe it's time for a review. You can access a list of archived workspaces by going to the Workspaces list, going over here to where it says My Workspaces, and come down to where it says Archived Workspaces. So you can find them here if you're ever curious. Yes, a question from Rachel. When you archive a workspace, are the notes and comments preserved? They are, and even better, they're frozen. People cannot go in and make comments on things anymore in an archived workspace. Let's see, is there a file in here with a comment on it? Let's see. All items. Taking a while here because there's a lot of stuff in here. There we go. So there's 3 comments on this. So check this out. Commenting is disabled for archived workspaces. So it's like you're putting it in a time capsule. Does archiving free up system space? It does not. You are still paying us to host all of this data. It still takes up space on our servers. So it does not free up space in company setup. That is a very good question, though. People who are looking at their maximum storage and they're like, oh, I'm almost maxed out. Archiving a workspace will not free up that storage. It will free up an available workspace if you have a limit on the number of active workspaces. Will free up an available workspace that you can create, but it will not free up storage. If you're hitting a storage cap, reach out to your account manager. Storage really isn't that expensive these days. Otherwise, you're going to have to run some backups and then delete workspaces, which we all kind of go, we all like hiss at. So that's the Manage Workspaces window that is only available to company administrators. So very important. If you're ever wondering how do you change these column headers, like maybe you want to pull in a custom property field into these column headers, you can do that. You can change those column headers in company setup if you go to the Custom Fields tab and you go to Workspace Properties and then you go to List Layout. And so you can remove a column. You can be like, I don't need job number, so I can delete that, but maybe I want to add size. Save List Layout, go back to my Workspaces list, and now I have the size column. So some teams say, we refer to projects by a name and a project number. I would save the project number as like a workspace property field, and then I would add it as a column in this view. That's kind of nice. Now we have just a couple minutes left to quickly discuss workspace administrator permissions, but the good news is that now that we've gone through all of the company admin stuff, workspace admin stuff is pretty self-explanatory. So let me go into a workspace. This is our Macy's 2018 Summertime Gala project. And as a workspace administrator, I will always see the People, Settings, Properties tabs, and the Add tab button. As a workspace administrator, I also have the Options button on the Home tab where I can customize the Home tab. So a workspace administrator can come in here and completely change the workspace layout. You can go in here and you can type in free text like, hey, welcome to our project. And this is going to look terrible, but just as an example. So workspace administrators can change the workspace layout, the Home tab layout. They can also modify the tabs across the top. To change the tabs at the top of the workspace, you click on the Settings tab, and you come down here to where it says Tab Options. And from here, you can like turn tabs on or off. Like, I don't need project management, and I don't need the calendar. I can click on Update. Turning a tab on or off using those checkboxes will not delete the contents of that feature. So if I've got the Files and Discussions tab, and I've got some files in here, here we go, here are two. If I go to Tab Options and I turn this tab off, I click on Update, that's okay. I did not delete anything. The tab is gone. Oh no, but the stuff is still there. You can navigate directly to the Files and Discussions tab by clicking the link right here if you want. If you're nervous and you want to just look at it again, make sure it's still there. Or if you go to Tab Options and you just turn it on again, it'll update. We had a conversation a couple of years back. Bless their heart, they thought, hey, I can wipe all of my workspace data by unchecking these boxes and click on Update and then check these boxes again. And they come back and they'll be empty. It doesn't work that way. It was a sweet idea, but it was wrong. So feel free to play with these tabs if you need. This is where you can change those. As a as a workspace administrator, you also have access to the General Settings tab. This is where, as a workspace admin, you can change the name of a workspace. You can also change its URL. Now, changing the name and the URL have different effects. Changing the name just updates the way the workspace appears in the list. So it was Macy's Summertime Gala. Now it just says Summertime Gala. If I go to the workspaces list, and I'll use my fancy search thing here, I'll type in Gala. See, it just now says Summertime Gala. The URL is this address up here at the top. Now, people say, well, why would I ever change the URL? Here's why. There's very few times I ever see people change it, but this is an example. Imagine you name your workspaces with a project number and a project name. 114115, I'll make it shorter. 1141 Macy's 2018 Summertime Gala, and I click on Update. Cool, so that's my workspace name. I've got this long address. The reason why people will change it is because they'll make it short and they'll just include like the number. And the reason why they do that is because people who are like super tech savvy, they just want to be able to they navigate into the system and they're like, I need to find out what's going on with project 1141. So they just come up here, 1141, enter, and it takes them to that workspace. So it's a little trick that people use using that URL. Finally, last couple things. I know we're rounding up the top of our hour. As a workspace administrator, you can add project roles to the workspace. So if you remember when we created those roles in company setup, they didn't look like they did a whole lot. But after you create a role in company settings, you can then add those roles to the workspace. So I can take a look here at my list of all of my available roles. Give this a quick refresh here. I go to roles and I click this. I can say I need a dog sled driver. Click on Update. That adds the role to the workspace, which you can then, in the Properties tab, you can assign it to a user. So if I go to the Properties tab and I come down here, you see there's my dog sled driver. I can say my dog sled driver for this project is going to be Eddie. And that works into project management. I talk more about that in the project management course, but if you're ever wondering, well, how do you create and maintain roles? Now you know. You create them in company setup, and then you add them to workspaces in the general settings tab. So it's like a two-step process there, and that's in the project roles tab. The Access and Security tab allows you to change some workspace default settings, which we now know you can update across the board as a company administrator. The Configuration Options tab allows you to make changes to some things like the document status options, as well as one of my favorite things, the Files and Discussions folder route. You can change that to the Workspace route, which is nice, because when it's the Workspace route, if you click on the Files and Discussions tab, it doesn't drop you on the All Items list, which drives some people nuts. It now drops you here on the root folder for the workspace. Finally, as a workspace administrator, in the general settings area, you can clone and archive a workspace, but you cannot delete. I can only delete a workspace because I am a company admin. But if I were a workspace admin and not a company admin, I would not be able to delete this workspace. And of course, primary use case for workspace admin is the ability to add users to workspaces and manage their permissions. So as a workspace admin, I can come to the People tab. I can click on Add Members. I can add an internal or an external member. If I click on Add Internal Members, it'll let me pick from my company user list, or I can pick a group. So I can pull in that Add Publication team. And then I can manage user permissions in this workspace as well. So I can eliminate whether a person has the ability to delete or upload content to this particular project. So again, that's sort of like Workspace Administrator in short. There's not a lot to it. Essentially, a Workspace admin is a person who can modify the tabs in the Home tab layout, and they can add users and change their permissions there at the workspace level. You can also reach out to our support team by clicking that little question mark icon in the top right corner, or emailing support@imeetcentral.com if you notice anything about the system that you'd like to troubleshoot. That wraps up our iMeet Central University course for today. There was a lot of content, so thanks for sticking in there with me.